Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. As more firefighters arrive from South Africa, some much-needed rain is helping fire personnel battling the blazes in northern Alberta. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is demanding that Canada's Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino resign. We will explain why. And the Las Vegas Golden Knights are the 2023 Stanley Cup champions. The Knights took out the Panthers to win hockey's most coveted trophy.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Cooler temperatures and rain are helping firefighters battling a wildfire near the town of Edson. The blaze, which is around 2,000 square kilometers in size, is located just 1.5 kilometers from the northern Alberta community. Town officials say the air quality is also extremely poor there right now due to the wildfire. Heavy smoke from both Alberta and Saskatchewan wildfires has prompted Environment Canada to issue special air quality statements for many of the central and northern regions in both provinces. Emergency officials say more firefighters are arriving to help the 2,700 fire personnel who've been battling the blazes here in our province.
On Thursday, we are also expecting to have 200 additional firefighters arrive from South Africa. The elevated fire activity serves as a reminder that we are still in wildfire season, and there are many months ahead of us. A fire ban and off-highway vehicle restriction remain in effect for the northern parts of the province, and a fire restriction is still in place for the remainder of the forest protection area. I want to take the time to thank Albertans for helping to prevent wildfires by listening and complying with the current fire bans and restrictions in place. The latest wildfire information can be found on our interactive map or on the Wildfire Status app.
Fire officials say evacuation orders remain in effect for the hamlet of Fort Chipewyan, Mikisew Cree First Nation, the Fort Chipewyan Métis Nation, and the Athabasca Chipewyan First Nation. Drumheller RCMP are looking for someone who was reported to be intentionally setting fires in ditches. Police say the incidents took place on Tuesday at 6 different locations along Highway 9. Witnesses described the suspect as a man wearing blue coveralls and carrying a jerry can. He may have been driving a blue or gray one-ton pickup truck. RCMP are asking for the public's help. Motorists who were in the area from 2 to 2:45 p.m. on Tuesday are being asked to check their dash cams. If you have any information that can help police with their investigation, you're being asked to call them at 403-823-2630. If you're planning on doing some hiking at Waterton Lakes National Park, you'll have to rethink some of those plans. A recent rainstorm caused severe damage to some of the hiking trails and other areas of the park. As BCN's Angela Stewart explains now, the storm caused both flooding and rock slides, which has closed a portion of the park.
Over a 2-hour period, upwards of 50 millimeters of rain poured over the Waterton town site in Crandall Mountain Sunday evening. About 5 people were caught in the storm. All were uninjured and were airlifted to safety. Now officials are working diligently to clean up the closed-off areas.
When we initially got this rainfall, it was a very significant rain event in a very short period of time. So we observed rock slides in areas such as Bear Sump Trail right away. And upon observing that, we decided that further assessment was needed before we could open up other areas of the park.
Other trails that were impacted were Akamenia Parkway and Red Rock Parkway. But as of Wednesday afternoon, Red Rock has been reopened to the public. The downpour follows nearly 6 years since the Kenow wildfires ripped through the town, and Meidinger says regrow and recovery in the park has been ongoing since then.
That's been a really long ongoing process. This is another event that will take some time to recover from. Initial assessments appear that damage isn't going to be as significant as it was during Kenow. Those assessments are still ongoing.
Although portions of the park are closed off, the town site remains open to the public.
Right now, everything in the town site is open. And to be honest, drive through the town site, you would not even know that anything had ever happened. So all the businesses are open.
Suleiman, who also owns Bayshore Inn and Spa, doesn't believe the storm will have an effect on tourism to the southern Alberta hotspot in the long term.
People have been calling to say, should we cancel? Is the park closed? Is it flooded? And we're kind of saying, no, it's not flooded. The park's not closed. Everything you want to do, no problem. You'll have no problems doing it. So I think that's probably the frustration from business owners is the confusion.
Well, Parks Canada says this is an evolving situation and they will continue to take a measured approach when it comes to reopening up all the areas and parkways. Adding a full understanding of all the impacts from Sunday's rainfall will take some time. For Bridge City News, I'm Angela Stewart.
By the way, officials say that only 15% of the park is closed, but to check the Parks Canada website for updated information. Well, we had some light showers throughout the day here in Lethbridge with slightly cooler temperatures. There was also a tornado spotted by Picture Butte. Jeanette Rocher is here now with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, fortunately, no damage or injuries reported as of yet.
Yeah, Hal, some scary stuff this afternoon as some of us had our phones alerting us to the fact that we were under a tornado watch. And as you said, one was actually spotted right there just outside of Lethbridge in Picture Butte. There's the picture of it on your screen there. And this, of course, doesn't mean that we're out of the woods just yet, because oftentimes multiple funnel clouds can occur. So a tornado watch means that conditions are favorable for the development of severe thunderstorms that could produce tornadoes. So that could include strong winds, large hail, and heavy rains. That's also a possibility. Now, according to Environment Canada, thunderstorms will develop this afternoon and will weaken by earlier this evening. And it is a dangerous and potentially life-threatening situation. So if you do see those funnel clouds, certainly take cover immediately. Move to a building with a stronger foundation if you can. That is if threatening weather is approaching. So Hal, I will be back later in the show with that 7-day and national forecast for you.
Thanks so much, Jeanette. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is calling on Marco Menechino to resign following a report that the Public Safety Minister's staff was informed 3 months ago about serial killer Paul Bernardo's transfer to a medium security prison. Poilievre says this isn't the first time Menechino has misled Canadians.
Minister Menechino said he was shocked, totally shocked. And now we know that he was informed 3 months earlier and did absolutely nothing. At least 2 emails that he got from Corrections Services informing him of this move. And then after the fact, he claimed that he knew absolutely nothing about it. This is not the first time Mr. Menechino has lied to Canadians. I have a list. You need a list because it's hard to keep track. He lied saying that the police had asked him to bring in the Emergencies Act. They did not. He misled a federal judge by backdating documents. He admitted in committee that the RCMP was using spyware to gain information on Canadians. He lied that the Safe Third Country agreement was working. He claimed it was impossible to close Roxham Road, something that has now happened. He claimed that his amendments would not ban hunting rifles. And then later on, he had to admit that they did ban hunting rifles and reverse those amendments.
Federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh introduced a private member's bill to implement single-payer universal pharmacare. The NDP Supply and Confidence Agreement with the Liberals requires the government to pass pharmacare legislation by the end of this year.
We expect them to follow these principles. When we negotiated the deal, they knew very well what we meant. And so they're on notice now, and we've provided a path forward for them. And we now are going to wait and see what the government does. But we want this to be something that Canadians are aware of. We want to continue that public pressure as well. This is something that's going to benefit Canadians. We were also deeply concerned, as Don pointed out, that recent decisions taken by the Liberal government specifically undermined the work of basically Canada's medication price regulator. And a number of members of that board actually resigned in protest, given how upset they were with the government's actions. The government sided with big pharmaceutical companies to the damage, to the detriment of Canadians.
An arrest warrant has been issued for a former actor from the movie Dances with Wolves. Alberta police say 47-year-old Nathan Chasinghorse faces 9 charges, including sexual exploitation, sexual assault, and sexual interference with a person under the age of 16. Sutuna police say the investigation goes several years back, all the way to 2005. The actor has been in a Las Vegas jail since his arrest in January, where he's charged with 18 felonies, including kidnapping and the sexual assault of a minor. He's also facing criminal charges in both British Columbia and Montana. A former medical health officer was sentenced to 5.5 years in prison for sexually assaulting a child in northern Alberta. Dr. Albert de Villiers was found guilty in February of sexual assault and sexual interference of a boy in Grand Prairie between the years 2018 and 2020. At the time of his arrest in 2021, de Villiers was the Chief Medical Officer of Health for BC's Interior Health. The child, whose identity is protected under publication ban, was 7 when the abuse began. Now, in a separate case, de Villiers faces other charges, including sexual exploitation. A trial is expected to take place in Grand Prairie in August. Officials at the Calgary Stampede are over the moon to announce that Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen will be this year's parade marshal. The parade will take place on July the 7th. Hansen will become the first Canadian to venture to the moon as part of the historic Artemis II mission. It's the first crewed mission to leave Earth since 1972 and will pave the way for more space exploration, including to Mars. The very first parade marshal for the Calgary Stampede was James Cappy Smart, who was the chief of the Calgary Fire Department way back in 1904. The town of Claresholm is looking for a new mayor. UCP MLA for Livingstone McLeod, Chelsea Petrovic, left the role after winning a landslide victory of almost 10,000 votes over the NDP's Kevin Van Tighem. Back in April, Petrovic came under fire for comments she made, saying heart attack victims should take more personal accountability. Staff with the town said a by-election will be held on September 18th, and nominations for the title of mayor are being accepted until August the 21st. Car lovers in Lethbridge are set to enjoy a fun-filled day full of classic vehicles. The Newscast Senior Centre is hosting their very first ever Show and Shine barbecue on Father's Day. Ashley Kern, the program coordinator for the centre, says there's a special theme for this year's event.
So it's kind of unique in the fact that everyone that's entered their vehicles into the car show are all seniors 55 and older, which is kind of one of its first of its kind in Lethbridge. Usually it's for, of course, everyone to enter their vehicles. So we kind of, being a senior center, wanted to offer first dibs to all of our seniors in the community or from Norbridge in this car show. We actually are so full now that we have people on the wait list, and there's more people that want to join.
The free event will take place from 11 a.m. till 3 p.m. on June 18th at the Lethbridge Senior Centre. A number of Canada Day celebrations will be taking place July 1st, with the city hosting them at Henderson Lake along with Galt Gardens. Many activities will be taking place, including things like a food hub, a kids zone, live performers, and a fireworks display. A new addition to this year's festivities in Lethbridge will also be a youth market.
Last year we kind of did a test market with one youth vendor that was selling items, and it was really, really successful. So we decided to invite other like-minded youth. So anywhere up to 17 and under, they can come between noon and 4 and sell their wares for that. We have 10 vendors that have applied so far this year, so we're really excited about that. We have kids that are selling their own artwork, we have some that are doing jewelry, we have some that are doing soap, so there's just a little variety of everything, and we thought it'd be a really fun way to get kids involved in Canada Day and involved in the entrepreneurial system. So,
more details can be found on the City of Lethbridge's website. Lethbridge City Council announced this week that there will be free parking at City Hall during the last week of June. Councillor Ray Kododek brought forward the motion and told us why it was so important.
This resolution, which was primarily drafted by our city clerk, Bonnie Hilford, I want to thank her for that, is, as I said, to formalize a practice that's really been in place. And really it was to sort of engender some sort of media so that people would understand that they will avail themselves of free parking for the last week of June, so that they come and pay their taxes at that time.
Lethbridge City Council passed the motion unanimously. The Lethbridge College Kodiaks will be hosting the upcoming Alberta Colleges Athletic Conference Championships for the 2023 and 2024 seasons. The competitions are for cross-country and women's volleyball. On October 28th, a total of 10 teams will head to Nicholas Sharon Park for the cross-country event. Staff with the Kodiaks told us what it'll take to win.
Preparation and luck. I think that's probably the best way to put it. Preparation starting now, and so the athletes are away, of course, for the summer, but they're actively training. They have their training programs. They may be training with a club back home. We certainly send out our workouts, and so the expectation is that they maintain and build their fitness over the summer. Once they start in September, once they're back on campus, of course, we're going to get right into it. Lots of training, lots of prep work, competing in advance, of course, that are in our Grand Prix series.
Now, next year, the Kodiaks will host the ACAC Women's Volleyball Championships at the college's Val Mattioti Gymnasium from February 21st through the 24th. The Las Vegas Golden Knights are the 2023 Stanley Cup champions. The team, which has only been in the league for 6 seasons, beat the Florida Panthers 9-3 on Tuesday night, taking the series 4-1. The Conn Smythe winner, or MVP of the playoffs, was Jonathan Marchessault, who led the team in scoring in the postseason. The fans were quite happy and very colorful.
can't even begin to explain this. To hear them start this out of nowhere and go, oh, in 6 years you'll have a cup. 6 years we have a cup. It is epic.
Yes, they are the champions. You know, Canada was well represented on the Golden Knights with 24 Canadian players on their roster. That is the most Canadian players of any team in the National Hockey League. Overall, Canadians represent just over 53% of all NHL players. And by the way, the last time a Canadian team won the Stanley Cup was 1993, the Montreal Canadiens, 30 years ago. Hopefully the drought for Canada will end next season. Well, no drought here in southwestern Alberta. We had more rain again today, and that moisture may be sticking around short term. A full look at the weather forecast is on deck. A tornado was spotted east of Picture Butte, Alberta earlier today. The tornado watch was issued around 2:30 in the afternoon on Wednesday, with locals being asked to use caution. There have been no reports of damage or injuries so far, which is fortunate. As for our region here in Lethbridge, we saw a little bit of moisture earlier today. Jeanette Rocher is in now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, the rain has been a welcome sight, not just here in southwestern Alberta, but also in the northern parts of the province where firefighters are still battling the wildfires.
Oh, it sure has been, Hal. Up in areas like Edson, Alberta, for example, they've seen 5 to 10 millimeters of rain, and it has been much needed, so hopefully that is helping out the fire crews up there. As for down here, we are only looking at a 30% chance of showers on a Thursday, 60% chance this evening, by the way. High tomorrow on Thursday, 22 degrees, 27 for a high on Friday. That's our hot one for sure, with mainly sunny skies. And then mainly cloudy conditions on a Saturday again, high of 23, only 19 for a high on Sunday. Sunday looking at showers and then mix of sun and cloud on Monday, high of 16 degrees. And then we could see those showers come back again at us by Tuesday with a high of only 50 degrees. So it does almost seem like we're going downward in temperatures compared to the average high for this time of year, 22. Average low, 9 degrees. 34 was our high temperature on this day. That happened back in 1987. And in 1952, we had the chilliest on record for this day, which was only 3 degrees. 5:23 is when the sun rose this morning, and our sun set this evening at 9:40. If anyone's paying attention, it's the exact same as yesterday. So 16 hours and 17 minutes. We're only a week away from the summer solstice, which is the longest day of the year. Okay, lots of sunshine expected on the west coast. Victoria looking at a high of 19 degrees, 30K winds in the Juan de Fuca Strait. Vancouver 19, but 21 inland. Now, Edmonton is seeing a severe thunderstorm watch in effect for this evening. Also, they are under that special air quality statement as well. Now, that is due to the wildfire smoke in the area. They were sitting at a 3 on the health index today, which is considered still low risk, but they are still being affected by that local local smoke rather, and that's going to affect them tomorrow, even though they are expecting a 30% chance of showers on Thursday with a high of 19 degrees. Same thing for Calgary. Local smoke affecting the area, but that 30% chance of showers in the morning. Hopefully that'll clear things up a little bit. High of 19 there as well. As we move over into Saskatoon, we're seeing a severe thunderstorm watch for this evening there as well. But tomorrow, the skies are going to definitely clear up. Mainly sunny skies tomorrow. 28 for a high. Same thing, Regina here, seeing clear skies, clearing throughout the day. 23 for a high there. 28 for a high in Winnipeg tomorrow. Now, Winnipeg has a few things happening. We've got a weather statement in effect, which means we could see the development. Conditions are favorable for the development of some funnel clouds. That could happen this evening. And then tomorrow, it looks like mainly sunny skies, a high of 28 degrees. So it's going to be a warm one. Now, as we get to the central part of the country, Toronto, same thing. We're seeing that weather statement, that weather advisory in effect, where conditions are favorable this evening for the possibility of some funnel clouds. As we look to tomorrow, we're seeing a 40% chance of showers, though, with a risk of a thunderstorm. High of 22, 24 for a high in Ottawa, 26 for a high in Montreal. Both of those cities also seeing that 40% chance of showers with a risk of thunderstorms tomorrow. As we get to the East Coast, both Fredericton and Halifax seeing a 5 to 10 millimeters of rain. That's what's expected for tomorrow on Thursday. Also seeing some conditions favorable for the possibility of some thunder showers. High of 20 degrees in Fredericton, 16 for a high in Halifax. high of 20 degrees in Charlottetown. Also looking at the 30% chance of showers there, and looking at possibility of some thunder showers as well. High of 10 degrees in St. John's, Newfoundland. A little bit warmer as you get out further inland there, and a mix of sun and cloud. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
A deal with Volkswagen to build an electric vehicle plant in southwestern Ontario is expected to cost Canadian taxpayers up to $16.3 billion over the next 10 years. Now, that's according to an analysis by the Parliamentary Budget Officer, who looked at the fiscal and economic costs in the construction phase of the facility. The projected figure is higher than what the Trudeau government said, which includes a $700 million upfront capital investment and up to $13.2 billion in production tax credits. The PPO also says the deal would create a peak of around 3,100 jobs at the start of 2026, but that figure would fall to 1,400 by the end of 2027. BCE is cutting 1,300 positions and closing or selling 9 radio stations as the company plans to adapt of how it delivers the news. The eliminated jobs include a 6% cut at Bell Media. Bell says the job cuts are in response to what it calls unfavorable public policy and regulatory conditions that it can no longer outweigh. Its new plan entails moving to a single newsroom approach across all of its brands. Stats Canada says the amount Canadians owe relative to their income rose in the first quarter of this year. The agency says on a seasonally adjusted basis, household credit market debt as a proportion of household disposable income rose to 184.5% of the first quarter. Now that is up from 181.7% in the fourth quarter of last year. The figure translates to about $1.85 in credit market debt for every dollar of household disposable income. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 24 points on the day to finish at 20,015. The Dow was down 232 points to 34,979. The S&P 500 was up 3 on the day to 4372, and the Nasdaq was up 53 points to 13,626. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $1.15 to 68.27 US per barrel. Natural gas was even on the day at $2.34 US. Gold was down 6 cents to $19.42.45 US an ounce, and silver was even at $23.92 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $11.24 per bushel, barley's at $8.97, canola's at $16.03, and corn is at $10.36 per bushel. Live cattle were down $1.98 to $177.45. Feeder cattle August contract was down $4.55 to $235.90. And lean hogs were up 8 cents to 87.20. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 75.06 US. Recapping one of our top stories, cooler temperatures and rain are helping firefighters who are battling a wildfire near the town of Edson. The blaze, which is around 2,000 square kilometers in size, is located just 1.5 kilometers from the community. A movie is coming out with actor Jim Caviezel called The Sound of Freedom. It's based on the life of Tim Ballard, who's a former U.S. Homeland Security expert who fought to protect kids from the world of human trafficking and arrested predators, including pedophiles. That powerful interview with BCN producer Michael Clausen is on deck. Listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you.
The studio that brought us the series The Chosen has an important theatrical release this summer called Sound of Freedom. This film shares the incredible true story of a former government agent and showcases the length this one man went to free a group of children abducted from their homes.
It is the fastest growing international crime network that the world has ever seen. It has already passed the illegal arms trade, and soon it's going to pass the drug trade. Because you can sell a bag of cocaine one time with a child 5 to 10 times a day. God's children are not for sale.
How long have you been doing this?
12 years now.
How many pedophiles you caught?
288.
How many kids you found?
por rescatar niños, ¿verdad? ¿Puedes ayudarme a encontrar a mi hermana?
Te lo prometo.
For Homeland Security, you know we can't go off rescuing Honduran kids in Colombia.
Which means she'll disappear for good. Imagine walking into a room right now, seeing an empty bed. What we do?
You quit your job and you go and rescue those kids.
So at this moment, she could be a block down the road, or she could be in Moscow, Bangkok, LA. She's a major operator.
It's all rebel territory. No one goes in. Not the army, not the police, not us.
What if this was your daughter?
To talk about his hard road on the way to where good triumphs over evil and justice wins the day is former Homeland Security agent Tim Ballard. Tim, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you here. Tim, can you give us an idea of how big an industry child sex trafficking is?
It's enormous and shockingly enormous. It's about a $32 billion a year business. That's the transaction money. If you talk about how much money traffickers, pedophiles make on the backs of children, that's upwards of $150 billion a year. It's the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world. The United States, though we like to pretend it's happening far, far away, we generally are the number one demand, the highest consumers of child exploitation material. And we have the border policies that are facilitating the trafficking of children right into our country. So we're right in the middle of this, and we need to wake up. And I hope the film Sound of Freedom can help wake people up.
Yeah, I know it's going to tell your story, and it's really going to raise awareness. You know, that huge dollar amount that you just mentioned, that must mean there's some pretty big players. Can you talk about maybe some big players that you encountered in your investigations?
Well, you know, it's this weird crime, right? It used to be very closet, but it's everyone and anyone. I guess the hard thing, you can't really profile this. We've arrested educators, law enforcement officers, professionals of every kind, because it's sex addiction, and sex addiction hits anyone who exposes themselves to that. And of course, the more powerful you are, the more political or monetary power you have, you'll have your way, like a Jeffrey Epstein, right? You will have, or Harvey Weinstein, like you will have an easier time exploiting people and using them. So it really hits everywhere, and that's why the world needs to wake up. I mean, it's now rivaling the drug trade, the buying and selling of people. You can sell a bag of cocaine one time, you can sell a child 10 to 20 times in a 24-hour period, which is a real stat that actually is happening. So, and people don't want to talk about it. And if we don't talk about it, we're never going to resolve this thing.
Right. So on that note, can you describe why this film is so important right now?
You know, I think it's important, just like historically, if you look at how we ended slavery, like how we even allowed it for 350 years during that transatlantic slave trade, it's insane. But the more important question is what finally ended it. And as much as I love Abraham Lincoln, even he admitted it wasn't him. It was the storytellers. When he met Harry Beecher Stowe for the first time, who wrote the book Uncle Tom's Cabin, thus joining her voice with the great voices like Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman and others. But when he met that little author of that book, he said to her, "So you're the little lady that wrote the big book that started this war." And he knew that it was the storytellers that actually shook the foundations of Washington and actually caused him to change the course with the help of God. And he would admit that as well, but that he changed the course of the Civil War and thus changed the course of history. But it's the storytellers, it's the media. And back then it was books and tracks and speakers. Today it's motion pictures. And so we hope Sound of Freedom could be the modern day version to attack modern day slavery of Uncle Tom's Cabin. And that, you know, Eduardo Verástegui and Alejandro Monteverde, these amazing storytellers, they could be the Harry Beecher Stowe of our day, of our slavery that we need to attack hard.
Right, and just to put some realism to the conversation that you and I are having, just in those first 14 days of May, Cleveland police said that 27 children were reported missing just in those 14 days. So as an investigator, I'd like to ask you, what do numbers like that mean to you?
it means that at least it's being reported now, but it's not. It's been going on forever. I mean, I've been watching it happen, but no one talks about it. One of the most frustrating things during my 12-year career as a federal agent was I couldn't tell people. The few people around me that I could mention it to, they didn't even they didn't want to believe me. They thought that child exploitation meant 17-year-olds. And how can you, because a decent mind can't comprehend that a 7-year-old or a 5-year-old could be sexually abused and raped. Like you can't conceptualize it, and so you don't talk about it. And so I'm grateful that we're talking about it. There's media out there like your network and others who want to, are willing to shine a light into this darkness. Because until we do that, we've rescued, our foundation has rescued 7,000 women and children, and assisted through my other foundation, the Nazarene Fund, founded by Glenn Beck. I run that as well. I mean, we've helped tens of thousands of people, but even that great number is a drop in the bucket relative to 6 million children who are currently in some form of slavery. And so we cannot alone solve this problem. We can rescue the 1 and the 2 and the 3, and we'll always do that. But until the media gets involved, until people show up and we get 2 million butts in seats on July 4th to watch Sound of Freedom, until that happens, we're not going to end it.
Now, I want to ask you about, there's a line in the movie where Jim Caviezel, playing your character, he's asked about the number of perpetrators he's caught, and then he's asked, well, how many children have you rescued? Could you describe that moment in your life where everything changed? Absolutely.
All I did, and that's what the film depicts there at the time, was get the end users. And it was satisfying, but it was always haunting. Like, I'd see the videos, like, where's the kid? Can't we find the kid? We didn't have the tools and capability at the time to do much in that area. And it was at that time that I started thinking outside the box. How do we get the kids? And as the movie will show, I end up seeing for the first time. And they filmed this scene, by the way, exactly in the place at the southern border where I was working. Wow. I spent 10 years on the southern border. And it was the first time I saw a child that I had seen being sexually abused in a video. And the American trafficker was taking this little boy, this Hispanic child, kidnapping, trafficking, and making child porn videos out of the material. And he was arrested at the border, and I was the agent that was called in and began this investigation. At this time, he told me about his sister. He told me about other people, other kids, and that began this journey that's depicted in the rest of the film, Sound of Freedom. So it was that moment. It was that moment when I saw that child, and then he kind of put an exclamation point on it when he gave me this little necklace. The necklace he gave me was like a rosary to him. His sister had given it to him, and he's giving it to me. And I tried to give it back to him. He says, no, this is yours. And I don't know what he was. He's 5 years old. I don't know if some angel was whispering in his ear or something. But later on, I discovered my name was on the necklace because there was a scripture on the back that was 1 Timothy 6:11. And so all of a sudden it becomes this symbol from God to me. The filmmakers, I told them they probably should not put this scene in the film because no one's going to believe it. They're going to think you made it up. And they said, no, we're going to put it in. It's true. And it is true. And so that was it. That was that moment that we talked about before the show started that was transformative. That's when everything changed. And I said, I will never do anything else. My life will be dedicated to this cause. It felt to me like a calling, and that was it.
Definitely sounds like a calling for your steps to be ordered, to be in that one spot, the right place at the right time. And even having your name attached, you definitely had some red flags popping up. Can you tell us, as people see the movie, they go from scene to scene, but can you tell us how long of a process was it to that first rescue of that first child?
So it was, so interestingly, when I left Homeland Security to start the foundation, there was 2 cases we were working. We were bouncing back between Haiti and Colombia. The Sound of Freedom focuses on the Colombia piece. I happen to know that they're in pre-production, already to tell the others how, because it was almost just as, or maybe even more fantastic to me, at least, what happened, and godly and beautiful and miraculous. But so we were doing 2 operations. This all happened in 2014. The one in Haiti resulted in the rescue of 28 kids, 2 of which my wife and I ended up adopting. And so they're a daily reminder of the importance of our work. Then the other operation was in Colombia, which that came to fruition in October 11th of 2014. So it was basically from January to October is the amount of time it took from beginning to end, and on that operation depicted in the film. With another cool operation in the middle that's not depicted.
Gotcha. So that's after you leaving your law enforcement career, you started Operation Underground Railroad. Now, in law enforcement, you're always part of a team, and there's a scene in the movie where Jim Caviezel's character, he's of course playing you, he's headed up this river, and he looks extremely alone. How alone did you feel at times as you headed out to investigate and rescue children?
Well, especially in the beginning, many, many times, because you walk away from the cover. You know, I remember doing these operations and coming home and wanting to call someone to report to. I had no one to call. Our initial donor, who I would call the godfather of our foundation, was Glenn Beck. I would call Glenn just to tell someone, but even Glenn wasn't my boss. But it was like, it's a weird feeling, and you start feeling pretty alone because you don't have the top cover. You don't get to push the magic button, and a Marine unit comes to rescue you. And as we've grown, we've been able to build in some infrastructure where we have measures now. But at the time, it was very scary, and you are on your own. What it does, though, the good thing about being alone is it forces you on your knees, and you actually, if you can tap into heaven's power, well, that's even stronger than anything any government can give you anyway. So that's the silver lining in that being alone.
Right, and so that divine intervention. Can you describe maybe a moment, a God-ordained moment perhaps, where it seemed like everything was lost, but then God just came through and brought in some rescue or changed the circumstances?
I mean, I could tell you so many stories of that, but I'll briefly tell you one that just happened last year when the war in Ukraine broke out. My wife felt just so inspired. It was pure revelation, I think, and she said, "Go to Ukraine, go to Ukraine." And I said, "There's no sense in that. There's nothing I can do there." But she felt so strong. We went, and we ended up working with one of our partners at Aerial Recovery. And we rescued thousands of kids, identified a human trafficking ring out of Holland that was taking kids and trying to sell them into Mexico, Ecuador. It's insane. There's a 4-part miniseries coming out by the end of this year. But that's all. I mean, every step of that was, we blew through 6 countries, 3 continents, rescued hundreds of kids, thousands of preventative rescues in 4 months. And it's because God told my wife to send me to Ukraine, and we ended up rescuing kids in Ecuador. So that's how God works. And without that piece, nothing would work.
Right. Well, those kinds of stories, like the backstory of that divine connection and intervention, is always wonderful to hear. Now, I got to say, from what I've seen of The Sound of Freedom, it looks really intense and really compelling. How close do you think the movie is to being a snapshot of your experience at that time?
I mean, they definitely take liberties. I always say this, I'm very honest. They make Jim Caviezel, or Caviezel makes me look a lot cooler than I am, right? They didn't show some of the more cowardly moments when I did not want to do it, and I almost threw in the towel. But all the bad guys are real bad guys. All the kids are real kids. They take some liberties mostly to cover the identities, to not disclose identities of certain victims. But I'd say 85% of what you're going to see is what actually happened, shifting some times and some places and names.
Wow. So just shifting off from the movie just for a moment onto your organization, I was reading that you had donated trained dogs. Could you briefly describe how canine units are used in these rescue operations?
It's one of the most effective and one of my favorite things that we do. So we work with a partner, Jordan Canine Detection, and we raise and train dogs. So bomb sniffing dogs, drug sniffing dogs. Well, these dogs are trained to hone in on a glue type component that's in every single microchip. So it's in every cell phone, every SD card, every thumb drive, cell phone. And so what happens is these law enforcement can take these dogs into child exploitation material warrants, and the dog will find the micro SD card that you can hide in the carpet or in the ceiling, or these dogs will track it down, find it, And sometimes the only evidence that exists that a child's being sexually abused will be on this little tiny SD card that the pedophiles hid in. Well, no longer can they hide them because these dogs will find them. And we've deployed about 70 dogs. The vast majority of dogs that have been deployed throughout the US, and we have one overseas, came from our foundation. So we're kind of pioneers in this space, and we're not going to stop until every law enforcement unit that's fighting child crimes has one of these dogs.
Wow, that's wonderful. I'm pretty sure those dogs love their line of work. And as the Bible says, be sure your sins will find you out. Clearly, that is more true now than ever. Back to the movie, how can people assist maybe your organization and your work, but also the theatrical release of Sound of Freedom?
So if people go to angel.com, that's go buy tickets there. And Angel has a program where you can pay it forward, where buy tickets for yourself, your family, but you can buy as many tickets as you want for those who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford it. Because we want 2 million people on the weekend of July 4th in theaters, representing the 2 million children currently in the commercial sex trade. So angel.com is the key. That's the best and most effective thing people can do right now to help us fight human trafficking.
Wonderful. Well, I'm sure that our viewers will be very engaged with that angel.com website after they see this interview. Tim, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Genuine thanks for joining us and speaking to us about this important movie.
Well, thank you for having me on. We can't do it without media partners, so thank you.
The truck convoy of 2022 and the subsequent Freedom Rally in Ottawa was something that both Canada and the world had never ever seen before. The Freedom Convoy captured the imaginations and hearts of so many people, millions of people around the world. It was also quite controversial, with many who were against it, leading to the federal government invoking the Emergencies Act. Tamara Leach became one of the central figures of the convoy and Freedom Rally, and she joins us now from her home in Medicine Hat, Alberta, to chat about some of that experience. Tamara, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Now let's go back to January of 2022. This was a completely new experience for Canadians. How did it all really begin for you? What led up to the Freedom Convoy?
Well, I think the convoy itself was a collection of a small group of people that had very similar ideas. For myself, I know that I got involved because I was really upset with the mandates and the restrictions. They were affecting my family, my friends, people that I cared about. And about the time the convoy got started, I recall they were starting to discuss interprovincial travel, restricting interprovincial travel. And of course, I've got a large family spread across the prairie. So that was a pretty huge concern of mine to not be able to see my granddaughter.
You know, some of the comments we heard from a lot of our news teams that we sent out to Ottawa during the Freedom Convoy was how many people were kneeling and praying for your group, praying for the entire Freedom Convoy. What feedback did you hear from those around you about all of the prayer that seemed to surround the event?
Well, I've said right from the beginning that I feel that the whole process, the whole experience itself was divine, in that if we needed somebody, they showed up. If we needed somebody with a particular skill set, they showed up. It just happened that everything that happened, there was so many coincidences that they just couldn't be coincidences. And of course, the feedback that we got along the way, traveling across the country and even on the ground in Ottawa, was incredible, very heartwarming.
Now, you did a lot of work behind the scenes, you and your team. Let's talk about the leadership during that period of time. What was it really like planning leading up to the Freedom Convoy, going all the way across the country, like you said, to Ottawa?
It was busy. I was up early in the morning, usually 5 or 6 in the morning, and going to bed at about 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock at night. We were obviously working on many things like hotel rooms and stops and where we were going to get fuel and what was going to be happening when we got on the ground in Ottawa. So there was a small group of us that were in constant communication. And it was so hectic, but very exciting at the same time. And the great thing about it is that a lot of us that started off as strangers, I didn't know any of these people before the convoy, have now become like family.
Now, looking back, do you feel that there were some saboteurs in your midst? I mean, trying to maybe change the course to distract the core of the leadership group? We've even seen on the mainstream media some of the Nazi flags, Confederate flags Now, do you feel those were actually plants and not part of your group?
Well, I don't know how they showed up. I know they weren't part of our group. It's quite suspect, especially the Nazi flag, how that just showed up one day. And then, as you saw in the mainstream media, that's all they talked about was a Confederate flag and a Nazi flag, and not the hundreds of thousands of Canadian flags that were out there. So it's fairly suspect that that gentleman with that flag showed up one day and then disappeared, and that's all they talked about. And I guess the other thing that I found after or at the inquiry was that they had people like myself and Chris Barber profiled before we even left. So I find it hard to believe that they don't know who that gentleman is.
Now, do you feel that sometimes you had a tough time getting your message across to Canadians through the mainstream media, and that's why you tapped into a lot of independent media, including Bridge City News?
Yes, actually, I don't think the mainstream media got anything right, really. And it really came down to media such as yourselves and other independent media sources and citizen journalists. I think the convoy was really the rise of the citizen journalists because we had all that footage from cell phones.
Now, looking back, Tamara, were there some experiences where maybe you thought, we shouldn't have gone down that road? I mean, we also interviewed a lot of Ottawa business owners who were irate with all of the amount of trucks that were in Ottawa and people trying to get to work. I used to live in Ottawa myself, in Orleans. I used to, work in downtown Ottawa at the Sun News Network. So were there maybe some lessons learned along the way, things you would have done differently, looking back?
Well, that's a whole can of worms, isn't it? I tend to not be kind of a what if person. I believe that everything that happened as it was supposed to happen. There's not too many things I think we could have done differently. To be honest, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what we could have changed at this point.
How about, did you grow as a person as well, compared to when you started with the Freedom Convoy to afterwards, and including what happened with the invokement of the Emergencies Act?
I have much thicker skin.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we all have. I mean, I've always loved my country. I've always been passionate about my country. Have I always been proud of it? Not always, but that's for me what the convoy did was really reignite that Canadian spirit and again showed fundamentally who Canadians are. So I think it changed all of us in some form.
What are your thoughts when the federal government invoked the Emergencies Act?
I was shocked. I was actually shocked. The ironic thing about the invocation of the act was that me, my husband, and our legal team were actually on our way to go see Mr. Brian Peckford when the announcement came over the radio. So it was Keith Wilson that actually informed Mr. Peckford when we arrived that they were going to be invoking the act. And I mean, I was just shocked because there was no violence. There was no violence. Something that should be noted is that protesters and supporters stood outside of the Prime Minister's office every day for 3 weeks. There wasn't so much as a window smashed or graffiti on it or nothing. So yeah, I was really shocked. I thought that was a very heavy-handed tool to be using under the circumstances, especially in light of the fact that the border crossings had already been cleared.
So how do you think this would have played out if Prime Minister Justin Trudeau would have said, okay, Tamara, I want to sit down with you and the leadership group with the Freedom Convoy?
Well, that's hard to say. I think if we would have had any type of indication that they were willing to even listen to us, that we would have started packing up and going home. Because let's face it, after 3 weeks in the middle of winter in Ontario, we were tired, we were exhausted, we were away from our families and our jobs, and I think just a show of good faith would have went a long ways.
How about your thoughts on the public inquiry into the Emergencies Act? I mean, we learned that the Ottawa police really didn't do their job, potentially, and that's why more reinforcements had to be brought in. What are your thoughts with Justice Rouleau's report?
Yeah, that was Not a shock, I guess, but still a shock. I think a lot of us expected that outcome, but we had held out hope that it would have been different. What it did basically was say that government incompetence is a reason to invoke the Emergencies Act, and yeah, I was quite disappointed with the results. When we first got to the inquiry, I felt like we were going to be listened to. I thought he was really hearing, the convoy organizer's testimony and taking it all in. And then towards the end of it, it became very clear that um, it wasn't going to be that way. With the shenanigans, I know you've had Eva and Keith and them on your show before. The document dumps late at night, all the redactions, the cabinet confidentiality and parliamentary privilege that was used as an excuse when in reality there wasn't any in some cases. So, yeah, it was disappointing for sure.
Let's talk about some of the money donated through various online media platforms like GoFundMe and GiveSendGo. Did you and your group ever receive much of that funding?
We received the initial million that was released. I believe that was the very end of January. And of course, that was all frozen immediately, pretty much immediately, anyways. GoFundMe ended up refunding everything. And then we started that fundraiser with GiveSendGo. They also ended up refunding most of it. Of course, there was some that was in a payment processor that all that money's tied up in an escrow account pending the lawsuits.
So how did a lot of the truckers feed themselves and get the fuel that they needed to keep going, to survive?
Canadians, Ottawa citizens, people, the donations that we received was unlike anything I've ever seen before. There was food, there was clothing, there was gloves, chapstick, dog food, baby formula. There was reefers full of donations from Canadians. And I'm not sure, Hal, if you ever had a chance to get to Ottawa during the convoy, but just about on every street corner, there was little kitchens set up, feeding people and feeding the homeless. And it was incredible.
We can't forget about the barbecues and the bouncy castles too, right?
That's right. The barbecues and the bouncy castles, yes.
Tamara, I'm sure it seems to many Canadians that the government used you as a focal point for their power and allegedly some of their vengeance. What powered you to keep going during your tough times in court and even jail?
God, for lack of a better word. I recognized after my arrest when I was in jail that it was thy will, not my will, and that there was obviously more work for me to do. I believe that the convoy itself ended up exposing things like the mainstream media and the banking system and, organizations like GoFundMe. And I felt that there was just more work that needed to be done. And I just put one foot in front of the other and trusted that I was going to be okay. And here I am, just fine.
Can you talk about the level of support you received from your friends and family and different communities across the country?
Oh, the support has been incredible. Of course, my family has been amazing. My parents, as you know, led the convoy out in their pilot truck from Medicine Hat all the way to Ottawa. So that was a really amazing experience for me to have with my mom and dad. My friends have been amazing, and I've made so many new friends all across the country. My Canada has gotten considerably smaller in the months since the convoy, for sure.
There are many differing opinions as to what the future holds for Albertans and Canadians, Tamara. What do you see as the future for Canada?
Well, that's a tough question. There's a lot going on in Canada right now, but I always have faith. I believe that good will always win, and I think we're headed in the right direction. So it'll be interesting to see how this Chinese interference nonsense all plays out. I mean, there's so much going on right now. It's hard to keep track of it all, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. I want to circle back to your time in jail. Let's talk a bit about that experience and maybe people's lives that you touched while you were behind bars. Let's just talk about the time specifically. What was that like for you?
I met some pretty good people in there, and I did have some support from some of the guards and personnel that worked there. There was people when I was originally arrested last winter. There was actually a couple girls from the convoy that were in jail already. That not they weren't organizers, but they had just been caught getting supplies and stuff. So and we weren't too sure. And by we, I mean myself and some of the officers at the remand center. We weren't too sure what they were going to think of me. And I remember these two officers calling me into this room and they explained that they dealt with high profile cases and they were wondering if I was worried for my safety in there, and explained to me, what happens to women that don't get along with other women in jail. So I remember at the end of the conversation, one of the officers asked if I was worried or concerned. And I said, well, I wasn't, but I kind of am now. But no, you know what? They were great. A lot of the ladies that I met in jail are wonderful people. They're stuck in the addictions cycle, and which is too bad. But the staff, and even at the courthouse too, I had so much support at the courthouse. So it was quite an experience for someone who's never even been in Facebook jail before.
So can you fill in our viewers where it stands right now? Are you still facing any charges?
Yeah, so our trial, Chris Barber and I, of course, are co-accused, and our trial is scheduled to start September the 5th in Ottawa. And so really looking forward to getting those charges dealt with, and hopefully everything stays on the timeline that we have as it sits right now.
And what are the charges? Did they tell you specifically?
Mischief, counseling to commit mischief, intimidation, I think is one, and counseling intimidation, and I want to say disobey a public order, and there's something else too. I can't remember.
Wow. Tamara, let me ask you something. Do you potentially see another Freedom Convoy in our future?
Not with me involved in it anyways. I'm
Why
still
not?
dealing with
Come
the
on.
first one.
You've got the
I'm still
experience.
dealing with the first one. You know, Hal, I think the convoy was a once in a lifetime experience. I think it was a perfect storm of a bunch of different circumstances and events. And I don't know if we'll ever see that again in my lifetime.
Tamara Leach was one of the organizers of the Freedom Convoy. They captured the imaginations of so many around the world, and she joined us from Medicine Hat. Tamara, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.